Hannah Dunning, welcome to the show.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so excited to talk with you, and I'm just going to preface this by saying there is so much to unpack and there's so much to teach to learn and that you can teach us, myself and the audience. And we've already decided that this is two episodes. And we aren't even exactly sure how we're outlining this. We're just going to go with the conversation. You and I can do this together. So
Love it.
let's start by saying that you are the clean clothing chick. And we're not talking about like keeping your whites white and all of that. We're talking about the toxicity that's in our clothes.
Mm,
And I follow you on Instagram and I learn from you every single day. And I said to you on one of your posts the other day that you are going to change my life because even
mm,
being in my closet, getting ready for this interview, I'm like, I need to do better. I need to do
mm.
better. I need to do better. And so you're on a mission and you are growing every day. And so let's get started. I want to know, I always want to know the why. So
Mm.
let's talk about what led you to become the clean clothing chick. Thank you for being
Yeah.
here.
Yes. No, I'm honored to be here. I feel like I was chosen specifically for this weird niche mission that I never would have guessed 10 years ago I'd be specializing in non-toxic clothing or chemical regulation. That would never have been my dream, but I'm really grateful that my plans are not the plan, right? Because here we are. I always talk about the butterfly effect, and everyone has sort of different terms for that. And I even posted about the butterfly effect yesterday, in terms of our family story and what we've been through, and then now looking at what I'm working on. So, all the way back to childhood, I was raised by a single mom with the help of my grandparents, and specifically my grandmother, who I was very, very close to. I was so lucky to have that bond. I feel that isn't always common with grandparents. I think they're always special, but we were almost like soulmates in a weird way. We were like best friends. It just felt like we were simpatico, and I don't know how to describe it. I was a young kid, and obviously she was in her 40s and 50s. I had a young grandma, but we just really got each other, almost like, I don't believe in past lives necessarily, but that's what it felt like. It felt like we were just always two peas in a pod. And she had breast cancer. She had estrogen-sensitive breast cancer. She fought it once and beat it, and then went into remission several years later and ultimately passed away from breast cancer. And that shaped our whole family in more ways than one. She was the matriarch. She was, a lot of families are built around one person oftentimes that brings everyone together for the holidays and is sort of the backbone to the family. And that was her. And so it threw every person in our family for a loop in really different ways. Grief looks different from person to person, and it changed each person's life really differently. I have cousins doing all kinds of different things, and if you asked them their why, they would probably paint a picture back to our grandmother as well. So it's hard to explain in terms of how I got where I am, but looking back, I can see just a divine sort of like ushering into exactly where I am right now. It took a long time to sort of resonate with me in terms of wanting to live cleaner or healthier. I've not always been this way. I even sort of rebelled against that concept because, without talking your ear off and giving you too many details, part of my grandmother's cancer journey was holistic healing. And so our household was really focused on eating. We were eating organic food before anyone even knew what that meant. And if I had friends come over for a play date, they were less than stoked about what our pantry looked like. We were an ingredient household.
I have a
And
friend like that. I still remember the very bare pantry because we know that most of the fresh ingredients don't go in the pantry, and the very
right.
thick peanut butter that we had to stir that was organic. And
Mhm.
I eat that stuff now, but
Right.
then I was like, no thanks. And then
It
the
was
bread
not.
that was dark and chewy with all the
Yeah.
seeds, I'm like, give me the white
Ezekiel
bread.
bread is what, yeah,
Yeah,
that's so it wasn't cool then. And I had a lot of shame about that growing up as a kid, going
it's
to
hard as a
school and
kid. Yeah.
opening my lunchbox, and my friends are like, "What are you eating?" There was a lot of resentment around it. I didn't understand why my family was really doing that. It didn't feel good because I just wanted, gushers and, like,
Yeah.
Uncrustables.
Yeah. It's an
So
interesting thing. Let me stop you there for a second because I think what we're feeding our kids at home and how we're like what we are introducing them to is really controlled, and my son got upset when he started going to school and didn't have wrappers in his lunch. There was nothing in a wrapper. He's like, I'm the only kid who doesn't have wrappers in his
Mm,
lunch. And I mean wrapper like around the food. And and I remember even giving him tofu hot dogs. And the
mhm.
first time his dad gave him a real hot dog, forget it. So then I try to cut the two hot dogs in half, and at least you get half of a good,
Mm,
healthier version. And then I'd put ketchup down the middle, trying to like fake him out. And from then on, he didn't eat the. So I think that it's an interesting thing that when we set that foundation, and
mhm,
we can't control what happens as much when they go to school, but my kid doesn't eat out of a package now.
mm,
And I know that in what you're doing in the world now
mm.
stems from that part that even if it wasn't so fun as a kid, right?
For sure. And it's like with anything, religion or just general upbringing, you're going to rebel and you'll find your own way. And maybe it'll lead you right back to where your parents were, right? Or
Mhm.
maybe you'll go down a completely different path. But what I do know is that my mom and my family had just the best intentions ever.
Sure.
And I
Yeah.
think they did a lot of things really, really right. And I do not think I would be where I am today without that foundation. So, yeah, you might go back and forth or change your mind, but the foundation is what matters.
Yeah.
And that is what I am trying to lay with my own children, which is why I am on this journey. And really, when I started having my kids, is when something clicked. And I think a lot of women will say the same thing, where, you're kind of just doing your thing. And all of a sudden, now you have a human whose everything
Mhm.
depends on you. And now you have your motherly instincts and anxiety, and especially like postpartum anxiety. And now you're reading labels more than you ever had, and maybe considering what's in your kids' blankets or clothing. And for me, long story short, it sort of all led up to that point of having kids and realizing that there were so many things that no one else was protecting us from. I think that's a really interesting misconception with especially our generations is we just kind of expect things to be done for us.
Mhm.
It's a really comfortable thing, and frankly
Especially
that's a blessing.
safety
Right,
thing.
especially safety, and really
Yeah.
that's a blessing because it means you've been really sheltered, and
Right.
how amazing is that, right? But at the same time, it's a rude awakening when you realize that that's actually not real,
Yeah.
and that nobody is making sure that there aren't really crazy chemicals in our everyday things. Nobody is keeping that from entering your home except for you.
Okay, I'm going
And
to stop
so
you there. I'm going to stop you there. We're going to take a break, come back. I want to get right back to the conversation. And I'm fascinated by how you got here and just how much you've accomplished in such a short period of time. So we'll take a break with Hannah. We'll be right back. Okay, we are here talking with you, Hannah Dunning. I want to mention too that you have a podcast called the Hannah Dunning Show. It's a podcast, and then you coined yourself as the clean clothing chick. And we're unpacking all of this. We're doing it in 2 episodes because there's a lot to cover, and I don't want to rush you at all. And we have a lot to learn. So we were talking about how all of this work that you're doing, and we'll get to that, stems from your upbringing, circling back once you had children of your own, and reading
Mhm,
labels and understand the safety or unsafeness of clothing, and what is the responsibility as parents because it isn't regulated in the United States. So let's get to that
mhm,
part. Let's talk about when your eyes started to open to the fact that your kids were wearing clothing that were toxic, that so
mhm.
many kids and grown people are wearing clothes that are toxic.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an interesting story for me because I was in corporate America for about 10 years. I'd moved up the ladder and I thought I'd spend the rest of my life in big tech. That was where I saw my life going. We had the fires here in Lahaina. I live on Maui, about 5 miles away from where the fires devastated our state, much like the Palisades fires that I know a lot of people are familiar with as well. And we were offline for about 2 months. And I had 2 months to really stare life in the face and ask, what the heck am I doing with my life? And at that time, there was so much toxicity in the air and in the soil and in our water. And, we were all worried about even just our kids being outside because we had our entire town burn. I mean, imagine what was in the dust and the water and et cetera. So collectively as a community, we were all asking, how can we protect ourselves and our children? And the first step is you sort of think about air filters. Okay. And then you start thinking about, okay, well, then water. How can we ensure that our water's clean? And I had paid attention to ingredients in food and even had been checking labels for a couple years and started doing some research on that. But this was the moment where I realized that my job as a mother was to reduce toxic loads in my children because they were having to process so much just walking outside, right? Taking a deep breath of air. Who knows what was in that air? So I wanted to control the controllables. And we know you can't control everything, but I could control what was in their closet. I could control what was in our fridge and our pantry. And frankly, that's sort of the moment where I realized I needed to be more vocal about the fact that people should be paying attention to things like their wardrobe, because the more stressed your body is with toxins from all around us, the more you need to pay attention to things like their closet, because that means your body is also focused then on protecting itself on the skin level, when really you want it to be focusing on protecting itself otherwise, right? So that is really sort of the moment where I realized I needed to share with my friends that they should be considering what they were putting on their kids' skin while their kids' bodies tried to handle the air, the water.
And what a
And
good time to introduce it too, because you had a captive audience in your
right,
friends. If the fires hadn't happened and everyone was going on, it almost always takes something,
right.
some kind of tragedy, some type of big lesson that you either make a big pivot or you don't. But you had an audience now, and when I say audience, I mean your friends or whomever you started to share with, saying, hey, we're doing all this trying to keep our air clean and we're trying to check our
Mm,
water, but this is the information I'm gathering about this other stuff too. And
right.
so would that have even been possible if
Who
who
knows?
knows? But
Yeah.
now you have this captive audience saying, yeah, okay, we got to do whatever we can.
Correct. And another layer on top of that is I was 12 weeks pregnant when the fires happened and I
Mm,
miscarried a couple weeks later.
mm.
And so, you
Sorry.
know, yeah, no, thank you. And I had miscarriages actually before our first son, and that's a whole nother story with my own health issues. But this is what I mean by the butterfly effect or like divine inspiration. As you look back and there are so many chapters of your life and so many little moments that just lead up to this really spectacular knowing of what you are meant to do. And so I struggle sometimes to explain exactly when it happened or exactly when I came upon the idea of dedicating my entire life to research and advocacy for chemicals and clothing, right? Like, how do you explain this when your entire life has just led up exactly to this moment? So
It's a
that's
huge responsibility too, because I mean, it's a commitment because, and not
mhm,
to mention that you show up on social media really regularly. So, everybody's saying, well, what about that in the background? And what about that you wore? Is that okay? And it's a big commitment to, you know, make this be the thing that you are all about because
right.
all eyes are on you.
Yeah, I have this thing. I was just thinking about this or praying about this the other day. It's like legacy for me.
Yes.
And it's actually not even my legacy, it's that of my grandmother.
I was
And
going to say that. I think that's a beautiful way to say it. Yes.
her legacy, right? Like it's not for naught. And
Yeah.
I think that's a
Legacy work.
responsibility. Right, exactly. That's every person in my family. When I went back and I said that we all handled the grief differently, I think we all feel the responsibility of using her story for good. And I feel like that's what pushes me every day because you're right, it's exhausting. It's so heavy. And frankly, I have so many industries who would love nothing more than to probably silence me for whatever that's worth. But at the end of the day, it's not me
Yeah.
anyways. I just feel
Yeah.
like I'm a mouthpiece for something that's really much greater than me.
It's so relatable. I mean, my late husband passed from after having double lung transplant, and I've been speaking about patient advocacy and donor registration and being a registered donor and what all of that means
Mm.
for 21 years. And I get paid to go and stand on a stage and talk about this. Now, I've stepped back from that since losing my dad for my own personal reasons at this point in my life. I think I've done a lot of good and helped a lot of people through their tragedies, and I kind of need to step away from that for my own good.
Mhm.
But what I will say about it is I was getting paid money to stand there, and whether it was a provider, a patient, or caregiver, each could take from my story what they needed. And it is legacy work. And it was
Mm.
keeping a promise that I made to him that his story would be told.
Mhm.
And I think that what you're doing, that was the thing I wanted to say right away out of the gate that I didn't say, is it is legacy work. For however long you do it, whatever change you bring, whenever
Mhm.
you decide that this part of your this part of your legacy work is done. It could be next month, it could be never. You don't know.
Mhm.
But the work you're doing now is is it's motivating to get up in the morning, even though it is really hard work. There's a lot of things that I would have rather stood on the stage and talk about than losing my
Right.
husband and almost losing my mother and all of those things. So
Mhm.
it's relatable to know that sometimes the work we're given
Mhm.
is not tons of fun.
Yeah, 100%. And it's
Mhm.
frankly back to social media. When I first started social media and specifically talking about what's in our clothes, probably 90 to 95%, if not higher, of the people commenting were super negative. You're
Yeah.
crazy. This is ridiculous. Stop eating your clothes. What are you doing?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
comments like that. But a year later, I've only been doing this for a year in terms of the social media aspect. Research much longer, but social media only a year. And the comments are 99%. Oh my gosh,
Asking you questions
I've
like,
been thinking
yes,
about this, or maybe I've never
yes.
considered this, or what can I do better? It's so amazing to see the momentum and
Yeah.
the progress that we're collectively making as a society who's waking up to the concept of maybe what's in our stuff isn't helping us and might even be hurting us. And
Mhm.
that gives me life too to keep going. And the stories from cancer survivors like yourself, I mean, the amount of messages in my inbox from breast cancer survivors of the same kind of breast cancer of my grandmother, like that, these are the voices that keep me going because man, if we
Yeah.
can bring this side of my story to
Yeah.
everyone's story so that it becomes their own, like how powerful is that? And that is frankly what keeps me going as well.
Well, that's amazing. And the one thing I'll say too about what you just said about people coming in and saying, I'm a cancer survivor, I had the same type of cancer as your grandmother, they're saying. So then now you have the information and the ability to educate them
Mm.
about something that perhaps prevents a recurrence.
Correct.
That is so huge that they would not otherwise make that connection. And I'll say this
Absolutely.
about social media too. When we make a decision to promote our business on social media, we are making a decision to niche down to this very specific thing. This is how it works. And that's the only thing you're talking about. Now you're
Mhm.
sharing in different ways, you're storytelling, you're doing all the things, but it is one thing every single day or however often you choose to engage. And that in itself is a huge commitment. And that in itself is
Mhm.
part of why I stepped away from what I was doing because I didn't want to show up. I didn't want to talk about it every day anymore.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I mean, wouldn't it be nice to talk about umbrellas or watermelon? Like, I mean, like,
Mhm.
sewing
Right.
kits or something, there's, and not that those things aren't important. They are. I mean, whatever it is you feel
Mhm.
called to do, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's a grind.
Mm,
Sometimes it's a
yeah.
grind. So let's take a quick break. I want to come back and then we're going to lead up to what we'll be talking about in the second episode because I really wanted to lay a foundation for your story and your expertise. So when we come back, I want to let people know why you what you know that you can teach and why they need to tune in next week
Mhm.
for things, the conversations we'll have about things like bras,
Right.
one of the most popular workout clothing that is making you sick while you exercise and take care of yourself,
Right.
all of these kinds of things. So, taking a break, back with Hannah in just a minute. Okay, we're back, Hannah. And we already, I should say again, in case somebody's just tuning in, that we are going to have this be 2 episodes. So we've spent a bit of time laying the foundation, your why, the importance, what we're going to teach in the next episode, what you're going to teach us. And let's just also explain why you're the person, for one, that I'm having on for 2 episodes, which I don't usually do, taking the time to explain this, but also what is it? Tell me just a little bit of the research. We have 5 minutes left. What is
Mm.
the deep dive that you have taken that you've come up
Mhm.
with so much information that you can share on a daily basis like you do?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not special. And I say that I just exactly how I mean it in terms of I really do feel like I was chosen for this versus me feeling like, oh, I'm the person for this. I think great leaders don't really want to be leaders. And that's how I felt. I didn't really want to be the person to do the deep dive research because it is so heavy. Your point about social media and showing up, not only are you doing it every day, and not only is it gritty and hard and overwhelming, especially with negative people on social media, you're also talking about a topic that, one, is extremely backed by very powerful people and industries. And for two, it's a heavy topic. You are threatening people's peace in terms of what they feel good in or what they like wearing. So there's a lot of opposition naturally just when you're talking about something like this, especially when you're a little bit ahead of the curve. And I don't say that from a place of ego. I say that from a place of that's just where we've been. We have not considered what has been in our clothing until very recently, collectively, right? And so there's a lot of opposition, and I was not stoked to be the person to start talking about it necessarily. But the thing is I couldn't not talk about it because it was so important. And I knew what kind of impact it would have on mothers and women fighting breast cancer and little kids and husbands and all of the people in our lives that matter needed to know. And I felt like it was a gross, frankly, injustice for us not to talk about it. And if no one, if not me, then who? So I became, I don't want to say obsessive, but just absolutely determined to find answers. And I consider myself almost like an investigative journalist where I literally just started picking up the phone and calling people. I called cotton farmers in Texas. I called manufacturers of clothing in China. I just started making phone calls. That's how I started this journey years ago. Just phone calls, just started to talk to people, try to connect the dots. And then I heavily relied on research. We live in a great day and age where you can look up virtually every scientific study that has been done or is being done, public records. You don't even have to have a subscription anymore. Like
You
you
can use
can,
AI too. I just
yeah.
used AI today for the makeup that I bought that they say it's clean, they say it's all of this. And I said, here's all the ingredients. Give me a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best. And they did for each one. And I mean, I feel better about that because there's some apps you can use for that too. And we'll get into that next episode. But just having that information and having the ability to look for it. We are giving ourselves we are a disservice to our bodies without
Mhm.
taking the time to make that knowledge
I
powerful.
100%, 100%. And never ever, I just think we forget how connected we all are too. Like, what is keeping you from picking up the phone and calling the university who has a specialization in textiles and specific to materials and chemicals? I just started making phone calls and then that led to relationships, right? Now I have a few scientists on speed dial who I have personal connections with
Right.
who are far smarter than I. They have PhDs in chemicals and crazy stuff I never even thought about. They're breaking down to me what plastic is, like what is a polymer really? And I'm now all of a
Okay, I
sudden
have
have
to stop
direct.
you. I have to stop you, Kate. We're gonna have to go. I'm gonna cut it here, and then we're gonna end the show. Sorry, and then
No.
we're gonna come back next week to wrap it all up. Hannah Dunning. You can follow her on Instagram. You can listen to her podcast, The Hannah Dunning Show, and you are the Clean Clothing Chick. We will be back with you next week. Sorry.
Thanks, Lisa.
I cut
You
you
all.
off.